Hi, good evening, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of the Minority Report. I'm Marlon David, your host, and as usual, it is a pleasure coming into your homes, spending this time with you, really kicking it off. We have seen quite an eventful week, or the last couple of weeks. We were not live last week because we did a rerun program wanting to solidify some points that were made from a meeting or a session that we had 2 weeks prior, and really laying the groundwork for the foundation as it pertains to what would have happened next in relation to the minority leader, the minority councillor, and the 34th sitting of the Assembly. So tonight we definitely have an interesting program in store for you. One of the things that we've always upheld is the fact that the program is not just to deal with the politics in terms of holding this administration accountable and highlighting issues and so on, but part of the program, there's a strong element of us being able to educate the public with information that is necessary to make informed decisions. And tonight's program is one that is geared towards really educating the general public right here in Tobago on some matters that are very, very pertinent and are actually on the very doorstep, if I can say that, of the decision-making process as it relates to Tobago. And so we're going to be going into a bit of those discussions as the program unfolds. We're going to be having some guests in studio, we're going to be having some guests virtually, and we are going to be having quite an interesting panel to assist us with this discussion. If you are already logged on, I want to indicate that you can also share with your friends the Tobago Updates website, where you can view the show. You can log into the Tobago Updates YouTube channel, where you can also participate in the live show. Most of you are logged on to the Facebook page, and I know it gives you the opportunity to comment, to share your ideas, to give feedback and so on. But if you are an Amplia subscriber, you can also turn your television to 102, channel 102, and that is our Tobago Updates channel on the Amplia network. And you can sit back in the comfort of your living room and really enjoy the program. I want to encourage those of you who do log on the Facebook page and are taking the opportunity to comment. Let's allow our comments to be very respectful. I always stress that this is indeed a family program, and many young people and children also take the opportunity to look at the program and to benefit from the information that is essentially shared here. And so I want to encourage us. The comments are free, they're open. Anyone is free to lend their voice to the discussions. However, let us ensure that our discussions edify and they lift up and not condemn or pull down any individual or entity in a derogatory manner. So this evening, I want to introduce my guest in studio with me. Hasn't been around for a couple of weeks programming, but I made a commitment to us that we would have seen him this evening. Probably it worked the other way around, where I had to drag him out, but always busy doing quite a lot now, participating in the debates in the Senate and so on, and really representing Tobago well along with his colleagues in the Senate. So Senator Lawrence Hislop, thanks for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Marlon. Good evening, Tobago. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. It is really a pleasure to be here. I wasn't really dragged out, but I had some other commitments that I would have placed on hold to be here. So it's good to be here.
Yes. So before we actually get into the meat of the program this evening, we literally just came out of, and some persons, I think many persons are still very much in the mood of the Tobago Carnival season. Quite a lot happening in a short space of time. We saw the Soca Titans coming off, and congratulations to the young man coming away with the title verse. And then we saw it going into Juve and Street Mass and that kind of thing. And Senator Hislop, I don't know if there was any space in Tobago to do anything. I even think that at one point in time it may have become difficult to breathe because the air itself was being absorbed, and we have highlights of the carnival weekend. You know, so many persons coming over from Trinidad, and it really speaks volumes. And okay, this is the highlights that we getting here from updates. It really speaks volumes to the potential of the Tobago Carnival, not just as a carnival, but in terms of the collaboration between Trinidad and Tobago. The bulk of the persons here being domestic travelers. You know, it's always, you always hear the saying reflected in songs, reflected in statements that Trini love to party. You know, and now that an environment is increasingly being created, I think that the domestic impact, we're now actually seeing it in a major way.
Well, there's always space for festival tourism, and the carnival is just one of those festivals that have been placed on the calendar. Everybody would know that I am not a carnival person, but I understand the economic value of it. I understand the economic value of festival tourism. And it is something that we would have, that Tobago would have benefited from significantly over the years, not not necessarily the Tobago Carnival, because this is a new kid on the block. But Tobago has benefited over the years from your Heritage Festival, your Heritage Festival, your Jazz Festival, Blue Food Festivals. And even there has been some benefit from your concerts, your major, even your major gospel concerts and so on the island. And so there is always a benefit, an economic benefit to festival tourism. It's yet to be determined fully. If we judge by the numbers, we could say that we judge just by sight. We could say that the weekend was a success for persons in Tobago as well as in Trinidad. I think the question now has to be asked: who benefited more? I think that's the question that needs to be asked and to be answered honestly. And if we answer it honestly, how then do we tailor that to make sure that the Tobagonian doesn't get the crumbs, but that the Tobagonian gets what you may consider the largest? Because the truth be told, and this just speaks to the conversations that took place at the inception of the Tobago Carnival, which was that our sister isle has the expertise in doing this thing for over. I remember on a joint select committee, the chairman of the NCC said that Trinidad has been doing carnival for 200 years. I don't know how he worked that out, but that's what he said. And so for a significant portion, for a significant time, Trinidad has been doing this. It's been what? It's been considered, Trinidad has been considered to be the mother of all carnivals. And so Tobago should have embraced the opportunity from the onset to get the expertise, get the collaboration, the partnership with the mother of all carnivals in this instance. Being that the Tobago Carnival would have been the new kid on the block. This is what, year 3?
3, yeah.
Yeah, so Tobago would have benefited, I think Tobago would have benefited before if the partnerships would have been truly aligned before now. But you know, there's an old saying, better late than never. What this should teach all of us in this regard is that collaboration really pays off. It's better to sit and talk and find common ground than to, because I remember the days when it was said that we don't need NCC.
Yes.
We're going to Grenada. I remember the days when we don't want Trinidad involved in the carnival. But then the other question that the stakeholders would have to answer is, what is Tobago's product?
That is it.
What is the niche that we're trying to carve out in this carnival space? What makes Tobago unique? I heard some people talk about the safety and the lack of competition and so on. It's just an event of fun. But we really have to. I think we have to be a little more critical. And this is not critical for criticism, but this is critical to get the best out of what we have to
the experience. So
it's not being critical for criticism, but it's to determine the way forward, is to determine how the Tobagonian can. And you see, I hear the conversations about, well, we need to look at taxi services and fine. But then again, you coming into the conversation where you want to place the Tobagonian at the lower end of the totem pole, and not from the standpoint of who benefits from the music trucks and who benefits from the big bands and the big mass bands and so on. And so that's where the conversation, because the truth is, this conversation about the economic viability of Carnival is even had from a Trinidad perspective, from the national Carnival.
Yeah.
And so that's the conversation that we need to move to. That Tobago, where does Tobago fit into the grand scheme of things, and how much more can the Tobagonian or groups of Tobagonians benefit? And you know what for me, just looking on, what was critical is that this we have to determine what the product is. I think that's the conversation that needs to happen. What is the product? How do we market the product? Because I know the conversation about Carl not being not coming to the plate as it should and so on. But the truth be told, the numbers that they claim were on island, or that they claim were on island, had to be moved by something.
Had to be moved by.
And they had to be moved by. They
didn't swim.
That's right. They had to be moved by the national airline, and they had to be moved by the ferry service. Mm-hmm. And so the conversation as well, what we need to add to the conversation as well, is greater collaboration with the national airline. What studies have we done over the last 3 years to have a clearer picture as to our numbers for 2025? And how do you, I saw an article where the secretary said that, and I just had to smile at it. I saw an article where the secretary said that they're going to have conversations with Cal, greater conversations with Cal, greater collaboration with Cal. And I'm saying that you put in this, it's after the fact. These are the kind of conversations that you were supposed to have with Cal from up front.
From day one.
But you see, the challenge is you could not go to Cal with guesstimates, because an airline doesn't operate with guesstimates. So you had to go to Cal with facts and figures and say, listen, this is the marketing that we've done. These are the destinations that we've marketed Tobago Carnival. Correct. This is the interest that we have from these destinations. or these source markets, I should say. So then, how can we, as the Tobago House of Assembly and Caribbean Airlines, how can we partner to get, because this Welcome Home campaign that Cal has was rooted and grounded, one, in a slightly rebranding, and then two, in the carnival, in the carnival last year, or earlier this year, I should say. So it is, so the conversation has to be had with Cal from that standpoint, facts and figures, because an airline doesn't operate by guess, and the
like
airline,
a taxi.
Yeah, it doesn't. You can't wait 2 weeks before a major event and say to Cal, we need you to put on flights. But then the question Cal would ask, how many flights do you need me to put on?
Yeah.
Because I still have, as an airline,
the data.
That's right. I have an operation that still works outside of the domestic system.
Yeah.
And so it means then that I have to now I have to organize my schedule in such a way that I have enough aircraft to move the people from Trinidad. Or then if you're saying that you have numbers out of North America, I then have to determine how many flights, or if I put on an additional flight out of New York. Because the truth be told is that, and you're talking about taxes, you're talking about crew, you're talking about fuel. There's so much logistics that will go into a flight. And I always say to people, a flight is not a plane. Exactly. A flight has all these ancillary services that go with it. And so, and I reiterate the point, I'm not criticizing. I'm just looking at the conversation of the carnival and how Tobago can benefit more. A critical eye, and let's have a conversation and not an argument as to how we can make the product better. So we have to determine what the product is. And I know we're gonna have someone who has tourism studies as a background on, and so we need to determine what the product is. And then how best we can market that product and get the best out of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think, and I mean, judging from everything that you've said, and I'm glad that we have someone with a background in carnival studies and tourism, coming in with us. I think the critical part of this discussion is, first of all, to understand that carnival is, in the bigger scheme of things, is less about culture and more about making money. Yeah?
Well, no, okay, fine, and that's what I'm saying. We have to determine what the product is, because
for a lot of people.
Because interestingly, I sat that same Joint Select Committee that I was referring to with the chairman of NCC. Independent Senator Dr. Shada Patasa asked one question. One question she asked at the start of the inquiry: what is Carnival? And interestingly, the chairman of NCC couldn't answer what is Carnival. He went around the mulberry bush, couldn't say what is Carnival, and then couldn't really determine what the product is that is Trinidad Carnival. Yeah. And so when we hear the title Ritual and Revelry, you have to ask yourself, what is the ritual? Because
what does it actually capture?
Yeah, we have to determine. Those are the things that should have. I think that needs to be. If it has not yet, well, and even if it has, we have not been given a clear picture as to what it is. So, what is it? How do we market it? How do we get the best out of it? Because the truth is, after you've done year 3, you are supposed to be trying to be better every year that you've done this thing. So when people talk about, but you have to look at, if we've been fair, even the organizers of and the stakeholders would have to go back. Where did we fall down? Where could we go? What could we do to make this thing better? And that's all that's all that I'm saying tonight with my submission.
Joining us as well on the conversation, we have, unfortunately not in studio, but still very much willing to continue participating in the conversation, Kwesi Veens. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Maryland. Good evening, Senator Lawrence. Good evening to all of your viewers, listeners, those who are logging in, whether it's television or on social media. I see you all are getting into the carnival discussion. It's always a good place to be. How are you all doing though?
Good evening, brother. We good, man. We doing good. We doing good.
But see, I want you to chime in on what has been said thus far. We're just touching a bit on the carnival. Again, we're seeing more and more persons coming over, and there's no doubt about it, the impact that we're seeing now, literally on the domestic stage. There's no question Trinidadians are supporting the Tobago Carnival. Having said that, we know the number of missteps we saw getting closer and closer. And there's a group of individuals who deem the carnival a success because 17,000 or 18,000 persons came across from Trinidad and jumped up in the bands and participated in Juve and so on. Is in your opinion, does that reflect a successful carnival, or is a successful carnival reflected in the benefit to the organizers and by extension the people of Tobago?
So to answer your question, Marilyn, and I think it's a very good question. I want to take it from, because outside of my tourism studies, I also did a lot of event management, and I lectured event management, planned jazz, blue food, all of those things. And so from my experience, what was done in Tobago from as early as 2003 under, of course, the People's National Movement was a deliberate attempt. And I just want to give the quick backstory so people understand the context. To be at one time, and Lawrence especially might bear me out, Tobago actually had an open and closed tourism industry. There was a time when hotels were literally open and a time when hotels were literally closed. And through efforts of the late Neil Wilson, that was changed over time. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges that was found is that, listen, we have the 3 S's or the 4 S's, as some people may say, sun, sea, and sun, but so does everyone else. And as such, we look towards the different niches, the dive niche, the eco niche, weddings and honeymoons, and the events niche. And you all may recall there was even a gospel festival at one time, and many other events, and that's how the Tobago Jazz Festival was born. It was born out of a recognition that, listen, we need to do and build events, and Blue Food was taken from what it was and grown even more. So it was always a deliberate effort to say, listen, we have a plan. We want to bring more visitors on the island, especially during the low periods, whether it's October, the traditional low periods before the winter, because of course we got international arrivals during the winter months. So outside of those peak months, winter months, the July, August vacation, so outside of those peak months, how do we get people on island? And the solution was event tourism. And that's how we got events. And with any event, as I put on my lecturer hat now, you always have your budget and your objectives. And whichever event I've gone to help people plan, I've planned myriads of events. The first 2 questions I ask once I enter the room, what are the objectives and what is the budget? Sadly, and I must say, let me just say, I think that the Tobago Carnival, and again, I remember leaving office, and it's something that we, past Chief Secretary Ansel Dennis, Senator Dennis also ensured that we did the feasibility to have the carnival in the first place. What we recognize is there was a demand for the carnival, full stop. There was a space for Tobago to join the carnival calendar. And so it became, what do we now put out there? How do we get people on island? Because, again, the objective is not just to throw a fet and some people jump and have a good time. Some people get drunk driving tickets or whatever the case might be. The objective is heads in beds. Heads in beds, because we want to get visitors on island spending money. And that money comes from accommodation, food, transportation, and of course, entertainment. And that's the objective, one of the key objectives in the festival. And of course, the budget. And as you all alluded to, in terms of having a clear objective, in terms of what are we doing with the Tobago Carnival, there is not that very clear, listen, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going. I heard a discussion now, I saw it in the newspaper, that we're looking at a four-day festival. And again, what are the objectives? And fundamentally, again, what is going to be the budget? Because we saw that the budget was only released. Was it a week before, Marilyn?
Just about a week before.
A week before.
And when it comes being to, significantly less than what would have been expected.
Exactly. So when you look at the fundamentals of what makes a successful event, objectives, budget, we saw from an event management perspective here, we are seeing a critical failure. Now, notwithstanding, we have the excitement of something that is new. And again, putting on my tourism hat, we have what we call allocentric travelers, psychocentric travelers. Allocentric travelers are those travelers who want to discover, who want to be part of a new movement. And that's what we're seeing here. We are seeing people who want to see, and we're hearing Trinidadians boasting, well, I was here since year one. I even heard a radio announcer this morning on a particular radio station saying when she was there for year one from inception, she was boasting, I was there in inception and I was there year two, but I missed out in year three, and I heard it, and she heard it was really good. There are people who want to say that I was a part of it. I've been there. I have done that, and they post it on social media, and it's something, it does something for them. And so we have that initial excitement. The question is, Marilyn and Lawrence, past that initial excitement of the new kid on the block, how do we sustain Tobago Carnival? And to do that is exactly what Lawrence is speaking about. We have to have a clear product, and we have to be very clear in our objectives, just as you said, Marilyn. And of course, our budget needs to be clear. And anything can be a success. I can decide, Marilyn, I need to lose weight. And if it is I only plan to lose 5 pounds, although I may need, my doctor said I need to lose 50 pounds, whatever the case might be. If I set out to lose 2 pounds and I lost 3 pounds, then that's a success. Mm-hmm. And we are seeing here where oftentimes we get carried away with mediocrity, because some people came out on the road, it was nice, it was a movie, as some people say. Desron did one of his fantastic videos. We get a real nice vibe, it looked good. And so people forget about all of the other challenges to support, to ensure that value was captured, to ensure that there were long-lasting positive memories. And that it's not just, well, I want to go and jump and I can get this experience anywhere else in the world. Because how do we now differentiate Tobago Carnival? Is it that because some people, I heard one guy say, well, is the only carnival that you parade on the highway? Okay, if that's how you want to market it, then fine. And somebody else said, well, it's by the beach. And okay, but you know, we have other islands that have parades by the water. So we have to be extremely careful. Just as Lawrence said, we're not criticizing, but we have to be critical in our thinking and our planning as we look towards the long-term success. Because make no mistake, and Marilyn, Lawrence, we all want this to succeed. Because when this does well, Tobago does well. And the objective is Tobago and Tobagonians winning. When Tobago Jazz Festival started in 2005, Tobago did not have a marquee tent. People did not have generators. People did not have many of the supplies. But there was a deliberate attempt through the business development unit to say, listen, we need suppliers with a particular capacity, stages, tents. And so these businessmen were funded and grown to supply the event market. And that is when you have that integrated planning that you're speaking about, Lawrence and Maryland, to ensure the long-term success of the carnival. So do we have good workshops with wire bending? Right now, we saw in issues with costumes not being delivered. Is the quality of our costumes high? Do people feel like it's just another bikini and feathers kind of mask? Do we have high quality masks coming out that Tobago mask makers are doing? In terms of the music industry, Tobago Soca Titans, I always was part of pushing and promoting young people into music. Are we getting good mentorship? Are we building a soca industry, a good music industry in Tobago, which means not just having them sing, but having them partner, work with mentors in the industry. So there's so much to go into it, and we could look at the different elements, because there will be music, there will be the mass, there's pan. There's so many elements to Carnival, and we need to ensure that the Tobago Carnival, the elements that make up the Tobago Carnival, are well executed, well developed, and positioned in a way that Tobagonians benefit. And not, we don't have to bring up 100 trailers from Trinidad and speakers from Trinidad and DJs from Trinidad. And again, I'm not saying that we do not want partnership with Trinidad. I'm saying we need to develop the capacity in Tobago.
Thanks a lot there, Kwesi. A very in-depth assessment, I think, coming, and a very balanced one at that, in terms of where we need to be going. I know the conversations will continue. We have ourselves intend to engage with industry professionals as well, to have them to be a part of the conversation, to widen the conversation, so even the general public can be recognized as active stakeholders and taking part in that. So thanks a lot for those contributions. This evening we want to actually head right into the meat of our program and the discussions. And I want to introduce Minority Councillor Petal Daniel Benoit, who is also going to be joining us on a virtual link to be part of this conversation as well. And we know presently there are so many things happening in the political landscape with respect to Trinidad, with respect to Tobago, with respect to Trinidad and Tobago. We know that we are just heading out of what we call the budget season, budget debate and so on. A lot of things happening with respect to that. But also right here in Tobago, we have a number of conversations that have begun with respect to the autonomy bill that is presently before the Parliament, again coming up for debate and so on. Now, even in that scope of the conversation, I think that there's so much more to be said and to build out, so that the population here in Tobago gains a greater understanding of what is autonomy. That I still think there's more conversation to be had on that. And then even to drill it down a bit more, to gain an understanding of what is reflected in the bills. What do these bills say? What do they cater to in terms of Tobago's present or its current standing in relation to the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago? What does Tobago stand to benefit? And I want to say this here, anything that is an improvement on what we have now is in fact a benefit. And autonomy is not a destination in this case. I think autonomy is more of the journey. And as you go along the journey, there are conversations that can take place where you have consistent improvement, whether incremental or otherwise, in terms of the terms that have been set down, the terms that are laid and so on. And 2 weeks ago, the minority leader and minority councillor took a motion to the Tobago House of Assembly, which called on the Assembly to support the autonomy bills, basically. I'd asked the director to put that motion up on screen for the benefit of our viewers as well, so that we can have an actual read-through of it and persons have a clear understanding as to what the motion was about and what was the minority asking for. While we have that happening, we're going to have Minority Councillor Petal Daniel Benwa on with us shortly as well to give a bit of an overview as to what, how the debate took place, what were some of the points that were made in relation to this. But before we get there, or while we're waiting for her to finally log in, Kwesi, Senator Islop, you guys have been in and around this conversation. Senator Islop, you may have the opportunity to directly participate in that debate, the upcoming debate. Kwesi, you've been around the crafting of this position for some time. What does Tobago stand to benefit? Or firstly, does Tobago stand to benefit from this piece of legislation, this piece of document? We see the motion, the actual motion up on the screen. And if we can go through it before actually responding, it says, whereas the Tobago House of Assembly is constitutionally mandated to govern and manage the affairs of Tobago in accordance with Act 40 of 1996. And whereas Act 40 of 1996 provided enhanced authority to the Tobago House of Assembly, its provisions have not yet delivered the full level of autonomy sought by Tobagonians. And whereas for over 3 decades, successive efforts to achieve consensus both within and outside Parliament have failed to secure the passage of bills that would grant Tobago the desired autonomy. And whereas the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago has announced that the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill and the Tobago Island Government Bill will soon be debated and put to a vote in Parliament. And whereas these bills represent a historic step forward, proposing substantive improvements to Tobago's autonomy and authority, including the establishment of the Tobago legislature and the entrenchment of core provisions for Tobago's self-governance. Be it resolved that this House acknowledges that provisions of these bills will have a far-reaching and positive impact on the powers of the Tobago House of Assembly and the quality of life for all Tobagonians. Be it further resolved that this House unequivocally supports the swift and unhindered passage of these bills into law, recognizing that any further delay would perpetuate the long-standing disenfranchisement of the people of Tobago. Be it further resolved that this House endorses all necessary actions to ensure the passage of these bills, including an urgent bipartisan meeting between members of the THA and Parliament to facilitate their smooth and timely enactment without further amendment. And folks, that is the motion that was brought to the Tobago House of Assembly by the minority leader and minority councillor. Is Ms. Minority Councillor logged in with us yet, Mr. Director? Okay, we still await her arrival. Senator Hislop, Kwesi.
I am. You hearing me?
Okay, yes.
Hello?
I am hearing her.
Okay.
Nice.
Good evening, good evening, good evening.
Good
everyone.
evening, Minority Councillor. Still seeing your element of carnival in your color scheme around your neck. welcome this evening. I know you've been going non-stop. The work is never ending. But definitely a pleasure having you joining us in this part of the conversation. We have just actually completed reading the motion that was laid in the last sitting. We want to go right into it. Let's hear from your standpoint as one who was in the House making the contributions and stuff. How was this? How was it received? And what were some of the notable challenges we saw coming from this present administration?
Okay, so good night, everyone. Good night to the moderator, Senator Hislop, former Assemblyman Mr. Devines, all of Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, and wherever you are tuned into the Minority Report. So this motion was a motion that the minority would have brought as a result of private members' motion. We recognize that one, the discussion in relation to the Tobago's autonomy has been ongoing. And then in recent times, we would have heard the Prime Minister indicating that, one, he was prepared to bring back the motion after the culmination of the budget debates. So we thought it fitting that we should start the conversations in the House. We would have also heard that one of the promises or one of the objectives of the this administration was to place Tobago's autonomy on high priority, but we have not seen any discussions in the House, well, in or out of the House, led by this administration in relation to Tobago's autonomy. I recall in the first budget of this administration, the Chief Secretary would have put a committee in place, but I don't think we have heard anything in relation to whether or not the committee functioned and what was the outcome of that committee in relation to Tobago's autonomy. We would have also seen where the Chief Secretary would have sent a document to the Parliament, to parliamentarians, and members of the legislature were not privileged to what was the content of that document. So we thought it necessary that we should start the conversations in the House, and we brought a motion to do such. One, to allow the bills to be passed collaboratively, and two, to have some joint discussions between majority minority to ensure a smooth passage of the bills. So we would have amended the motion slightly on the floor because we wanted discussions to happen. So the minority leader piloted the motion, and when I rose to make my contribution, I would have amended the motion. So that last line or the last word in the substantive motion, where it speaks to Parliament to facilitate the smooth and timely enactment without further amendment, we would have deleted the word amendment and put delay, because we understand that persons, because we want collaboration, because we want input, yes, we understand that there has been long consultations. We want to encourage a spirit of collaboration. So instead of without further amendment, we deleted amendments and we included delay. So basically, the minority leader, in piloting the motion, what he would have done is to lay a platform in terms of the history, in terms of coming from 1980, with the establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly, all the struggles there, recognizing that the 1980 legislation did not fully give Tobago all that it required. And as a result, we had the amendment in 1996, where we are currently working with Act 40 of 1996. So he set the foundation. He would have also, acknowledged those persons who would have participated and been at the forefront of the struggle in terms of Tobago's autonomy. And, as a minority, what we would have attempted to do, what we did rather, was to highlight some of the positives of the bill, highlight those things or those clauses that are in the legislations in the parliament that are currently not in Act 40 of 1996. And you would have spoken to, the lawmaking powers. Currently, the Tobago House of Assembly does not have lawmaking powers. So the lawmaking powers, the expanded legislature, currently we have 15 assemblymen, 3 and 4 councillors, 3 for the majority, 1 for the minority. What is proposed in the legislation is 15 assemblymen, if I'm not mistaken, 3 councillors for the minority, 4 for the majority, and 1 independent. We are speaking of, we always have the discussions about laying the estimates in June and then having to come and do the reallocation in October. With this, once these bills are passed, when we receive our allocation, that is when we lay our estimates. So then we may see estimates being laid sometime after the budget reading. We are also seeing, and this administration speaks to not having sufficient allocation and being underfunded. The minimum allocation proposed with the legislations currently in the parliament is 6.8%. And if we look at what was requested in the estimates in June by the THA, the minimum allocation will actually surpass what was requested in this 2025 estimates laid by the Tobago House of Assembly in June. And it will also have some lanyap. So we're moving from 4.03% to a minimum of 6.8% with the inclusion of a fiscal review commission. And this fiscal review commission will oversee in terms of expansion of the budget in relation to the development agenda of Tobago. So with the proposed legislation, there is no upper limit. And, what we would have seen on the side of the majority, and I think coming out of each speaker, we felt like there was a different view of what autonomy meant to them. So in some instances, we would have heard that, the bills need major adjustments. In another instance, we were told, reject the bills altogether. But the deputy presiding officer would have amended the motion. But in amending the motion, it did not substantially change the essence of the motion. And even in amending the motion, when the majority came to debate, again, I didn't feel that they embodied their own amendments. So some of the amendments, and I want to go through the amendments that was made by the deputy chief secretary. And the first amendment was to the 3rd recital. And what was proposed was leaving out the word 3 and insert the word 5. And the second amendment was to the 4th recital. And the words proposed, bills to grant Tobago the long denied autonomy will soon be debated and put to a vote in Parliament be inserted after the word that and the words Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government be left out. The third amendment was to the fifth recital and proposed to insert the word should before the word represent. The fourth amendment, and that was the last resolution, proposed to insert the words with necessary amendments and leave out the words without further amendment. So when we look at what was proposed, again, all that I would have indicated there did not substantially change the essence and the spirit of the motion. So we opted not to object to the proposed amendments, and therefore the motion was moved, I would say, unanimously. So again, what we did not get coming out of the motion is, one, that they embodied their own amendments, and two, that they were not on the same page in terms of what Tobago autonomy meant to them. So the Chief Secretary indicated that the bill was good, and this was outside of that last sitting because the Chief Secretary was absent for such an important motion. So the Chief Secretary, outside and prior to those the motion laid by the minority, would have indicated that, the bills are good with some minor amendments. On the floor of the motion, the Deputy Chief Secretary would have indicated that some amendments need to be made. One of the things that the Deputy Chief Secretary pointed out is that she felt as if the bills are taken away. The current proposed legislation is taken away from what we now have. And her justification for saying it is taken away is because the motion or the bill speaks to inner and outer bounds of our administrative jurisdiction. So what is being proposed is 11 nautical miles. What we now have is 6 nautical miles. But when we go back to the current legislation, basically in relation to our administrative jurisdiction, it seems as if everything is in the current legislation is actually reflected in the proposed legislation, save and except the increased nautical miles for the administrative jurisdiction of Tobago. So in our view, we found it was a bit misleading to indicate that the bills are taken away because it speaks to an inner and an outer limit. We had another member also, speaking to federalism. So again, we weren't sure as to the position of the majority in relation to what increased autonomy meant. So in a nutshell, those were some of the discussions coming out of that last sitting on the House in relation to the private members' motion and our discussions on this very, very important motion to all of Tobago.
And two things, Minority Councillor, that I just want to, before handing the baton over, I see Senator Islop making a lot of notes. Two things stood out. One, that there is no unified position by this administration in terms of their leadership on the bill. Everyone who speaks tends to say something else. And it speaks volumes as to the fact that it's clear that they have no real direction for where to go or where to carry this conversation, even though they used it as one of the pillars of their election campaign. And secondly, it was notable that the Chief Secretary, for a motion that literally is positioning the history and the future of Tobago, the Chief Secretary saw it fit to not be present, to lend his voice to this part of the conversation, especially when, again, this is something that he would have indicated their willingness to champion coming into office. Senator Hislop. And then we go to Kwesi.
But before we go to Senator Hislop, I just want to encourage Tobagonians. Currently, there are the bills available in hard copy. They are at the Assembly Legislature, and I would encourage persons to avail themselves of a copy and have a read, because it gives an explanation as to the reasons why certain amendments were made. It gives an explanation as to the meaning of particular clauses in the bill. So the two bills are set out. It gives a brief report as well as to the deliberations of the committee. And I also want to commend the committee, because I remember when the initial bills came forward from the Joint Select Committee, in my view, there were a number of gaps when you compared what was proposed to what currently existed. And for me, the committee would have accepted the recommendations of most of the persons who would have contributed, whether it be verbally at the physical consultations, or would have submitted recommendations for amendments. And I want to give two examples, because if you look at the schedules, when you compare the schedules coming out of the Joint Select Committee, there were a number of items that currently existed that were not on the Schedule 1. And we recognize that those were amended. Now, when you look at Schedule 1 has more items listed that what is currently listed on the 5th schedule of the current Tobago House of Assembly Act. There was another issue where it speaks to the setting off of the tax and non-tax revenue collected by the THA. The proposed legislation was silent on that set-off and collection of taxes. And when it was pointed out, when you look at the proposed legislation before the Parliament, those were included. And for me, those were 2 points that stood out to me, that recommendations were made to the committee, and the committee would have adhered to and would have acceded, and those recommendations were included in the bills current. So in my view, I think now is the opportunity where it is in committee stage that you will look at the bill clause by clause, and if there are recommendations to be made, put the recommendations on the table. And coming out of the sitting, there were no meaningful recommendations that to say, we are not supporting the bill, and we think these amendments should be made. And that was one of the things that we outside of the Secretary of Finance making a recommendation, there was no recommendation coming out of all the speakers who would have presented. So I would encourage persons to get a copy of the legislations and have a read.
But you see, for me, the question I will always ask is what we have before us, is it superior to what we have now? Are we satisfied with what we are working with Act 40 of 1996? And that's, to me, that's the question that has to be asked. I sat in the House during part of the debate on the motion, on the private member's motion, and you were hearing over and over again from the members of the current administration is that we're not satisfied with where we are under what we're working with, but we don't want what we're getting. And for me, it really doesn't make sense. And I want to speak to the fact that and to remind the viewing and listening audience that the Joint Select Committee that was set up was not a P&M Joint Select Committee.
Yeah.
And by nature of parliamentary Joint Select Committees, there is involvement. Obviously, the government side will have more members on the Joint Select Committee because you are in government. But you have, on this committee, you had 3 opposition members, one of them being Julian John, as we know from Tobago. We had Dinesh Rambali and we had Rujanat Indar Singh. And so you had opposition voices on the committee. You also had an independent voices on the committee in the persons of Dr. Varma Dayal Singh and our very own Dr. Maria Dillon Remy. And so, and speaking to what the councillor said, there were recommendations that came into the committee that the committee would have made adjustments to what was initially put out. And so that's the process of lawmaking, in that we, I read read part of the minority report, not this minority report, but the minority report of the Joint Select Committee, which was produced obviously by the members of the opposition. And some of the points that they brought out in their minority report is that there was not enough consultation on what was being proposed. And I had to ask myself, but where were these opposition members when this process started, since with the forum of parties? Mm-hmm. And we're now at this stage where the entire nation now, outside of all of Tobago having the opportunity for months to speak on this thing, you've now given the rest of the nation the opportunity to chime in the conversation on a joint select committee level. And then even when the bills, as they are now, when the bills come to the parliament and they're debated, the bills are now in committee stage of the parliament, as made mention by the councillor. And even at committee stage, where you go through the bills clause by clause, you have the opportunity at that stage to even make additional amendments. And for me, the question I would ask the current administration, we listened the entire debate on the motion brought by the minority leader. But my question is, what are the proposed amendments that you have as the administration that is currently in office in Tobago? What are the proposed amendments that you have, that you would like to see brought to the table, that could be could have more consideration? Because listen, this thing is significant monies, folks, was spent on this entire process at the parliamentary level to bring in the experts and for the experts to give you their advice on this and their take on that. And we are at this stage where I believe what is in front of us as Tobagonians is far superior than what we currently operate within. Yeah. Because when you have a situation where the bill provides for the Secretary of Finance to now become, for the Secretary of Finance to now become corporation sole for the Tobago Island government, that speaks volumes. Because the outside of that, the next corporation sole in Trinidad and Tobago is the Minister of Finance. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if persons fully understand what that means, but that gives you a level of authority and control over so many things within the governance structure of Tobago. And so it is, to me, what is being placed before us is far superior. We talk about the lawmaking powers and all of these things. And I'm at a loss sometimes when I hear the arguments that we do not want what is in the parliament. And so all the work that would have gone into, all the labor, all the time that would have gone into it, we just saying, throw it away. Let's not move in a positive direction. Because that's what this is. We moved from 80 to 96. Mm-hmm. What is so difficult in moving from 96 to 20? I think the bills are 2021, I think they are. Yeah. What is 2020 and 2021? What is wrong in moving from 96, where you have limited powers, to the bills that are before us, 2020 to 2021, where you have significantly movement in your ability to govern Tobago? You hear the current administration talking about Tobago, about the Tobago government. Mm-hmm. Well, you're not a government right now. Yeah. So this takes you to another level of significant governance on the island. Let me allow
I know
Kwesi to jump in.
has quite an interesting slant. Kwesi, welcome into the conversation.
Well, let me start off by commending the Minority Council and, of course, the Minority Leader in his absence for bringing the motion that they did, because it's a very fundamental motion and extremely important, and I will explain why. The idea of autonomy for Tobago is not a new one, and we don't have to go into the history of it. We just renamed, of course, we named roundabouts after Mr. Bigat, and we now have a street named after him as well. So we know that a fight for autonomy or greater autonomy for Tobago is not a new one. And one of the challenges when going, because as it is right now, the lawmaking body of Trinidad and Tobago is the Parliament. And at the lower house level, where we have 41 members, we have almost split down the middle. And of course, it's also predominantly persons from the island of Trinidad. And I'm not saying it, I'm not putting that out there to cause any division, but to make us painfully aware that in reality, we have to come as Tobagonians. If it is we are saying we want autonomy or greater autonomy, as Tobagonians, we are already in a minority. We have to speak with a unified voice. And I think that the motion provides a foundation for that unified voice. And, it actually builds upon several other platforms that were laid before. As a matter of fact, the late Hochoy Charles, when he approached former Chief Secretary Orville London, and with the concept of the Forum of Political Leaders, it was with the recognition that in order to truly be successful at achieving greater autonomy for Tobago, it cannot be with a divided voice coming out of Tobago. There must be a sense of, we don't want to say unison, but consensus, where we are speaking and singing from the same songbook. And so it's almost a little scary when you can see, when we hear that when the current administration spoke on this motion, they did not have consensus even within themselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Still don't.
And so it means then that we are definitely in need of a consensus, a place of consensus, because any time the opposition, in particular in Trinidad, smell an opportunity that they can slow down this process for their own political gain, they will. And even beyond that, we cannot discount that these politicians represent areas in Trinidad where there are some opinions that Tobago is already getting too much.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And so if they are to serve the interests of some of their people, I'm not going to say all of their people, it is in their interest to not let Tobago get greater autonomy, to not let Tobago have a bigger piece of the national pie, to not let Tobago have lawmaking powers, to not let Tobago have all of the things that these bills are proposing. And so, and that is why they jumped at the opportunity in 2021 to shoot down the bill using that document that was sent to Parliament, signed by the current Chief Secretary and former Chief Secretary Hochoy Charles. And so the Forum of Political Leaders, and just to say to Tobagonians who, as Lauren said, they tried to use the excuse that there was not enough consultation to get the bills from Tobago with a voice, with a sense of consensus. Mm-hmm. It took 4 years, 20 venues, 100 hours, 120 written submissions, and 1,000 people were consulted. And so the bills fundamentally, what came out of it is that Tobagonians wanted equality of status, lawmaking powers, self-determination, greater participatory governance, equality of opportunity, and greater fiscal independence. And these are the key outcomes that Tobagonians said that we want. And let me say we, because I was there as well, these 6 items, and the bills do provide that. But I want to go to something that I'm not sure that many Tobagonians are aware of. At the 13th sitting of the 2017-2021 session of the Tobago House of Assembly, which that sitting was held on the 22nd of March 2018, the then Chief Secretary Kelvin Charles brought a motion which was very similar to what the minority leader brought. And that motion basically sought to say, hey, listen, in the interest of all of Tobago, let us come together, let us put our political differences aside, and let us come together for the sake of Tobago. And let me say that although the debate was a very robust one, the motion was passed without amendment. And the motion called, and I won't get into the preamble, but be it resolved that this House affirm its support to the current process for realizing self-government for the island of Tobago. And be it further resolved that the members of this House demonstrate their support by appointing a special select committee comprising 3 members of the majority and 2 members of the minority, with the mandate to work closely with the Forum of Political Parties to mobilize national support for the constitutional amendment, and that's the Tobago Self-Government Bill at the time. And I just wanted to go further, because as I shared, the bills, that motion was passed without amendment. It meant that at the time they were called the PDP, under Minority Leader Watson Duke. Farley Augustine was there, Faith B. Israel was there, current Chief Secretary and Deputy Chief Secretary. And they all supported the passage of that bill. And that led to 2 sessions in Tobago, and I want to call out the dates very quickly. On June 21st, 2018, we went to the Roxborough Secondary School, and on June 26, 2018, we were at the Works Conference Room. On June 21st, 2018, none other than the current Chief Secretary, Farley Augustine, presented to endorse the bills and encourage Tobagonians to support the bills as they are. And then, of course, I actually did the presentation on the 26th. Now, I completely understand, Jack Warner said that politics has a morality of its own. Yes, and all these things. So in 2021, when the Joint Select Committee came to Tobago, it was politically expedient in the middle of the 6-6 impasse for the current Chief Secretary and his colleagues to shut down the bills. It was politically expedient. Just as it was politically expedient to shut down Sanders at the time, it was politically expedient. They wanted to look like champions. They didn't want the PNM to have a feather in the cap. Okay, all right, job done. The bills were halted. The opposition did not support the bill, or they indicated they were not going to support it in the latter debate in Parliament. And so there was a stalemate. And of course, the rest is history. They put up a big billboard and they spoke about all of the resources that Tobago is supposed to have. All of these things, extremely politically expedient, while they were not in office. Now that they are in office, I am calling on this opportunity, and let me call it a fantastic opportunity for yet again
Yeah.
are coming together, putting aside political differences, because the good thing about the PNM is that we are dedicated to ensuring the passage of good law, whether we are in government or out of government. And what we are seeing now is that the same PNM, while in the minority, is saying, hey, let us put aside our differences, come together and appeal to the parliamentarians to pass these bills. And as Peter said, the amendment, we're only with necessary amendments. And what is necessary now, Marilyn, Lawrence, Peter, is that we take this commitment seriously, because now that it's no longer politically expedient to shut down the bills, the administration, as it is right now, stands to get that 6.8%. Of course, they would love to have more money to spend to do what want. And I'm not going to get into that at this point. As Lawrence said, they love to boast about being the government of Tobago. I'm sure they would love to have lawmaking powers. And so the question then, and of course we speak about, and we've heard of the discussion on the development budget not being enough, and we now have the fiscal review committee that is a mechanism that can be triggered in place of the DRC, which the chief secretary almost a year ago said he was going to trigger. And so as it is now, the chief secretary and his team, his cohorts, are in the position now that they are in office where they stand to benefit from all of the great things that this bill can bring to the people of Tobago. And my challenge now is saying, hey, let's put those differences aside. Let's follow the lead that the minority leader took when he laid the motion, and let's come together and get consensus.
Yeah.
So that we can go to the parliamentarians and say, hey, this is Tobago's position. The bill is not perfect,
Correct.
but it is progress. And we are on board for progress. Pass the bills now.
But
that is where we need to go. And I don't know if Lawrence, you had something to add into.
Yeah, this reminds me of that old story with the dog and the bone. Standing over the river or standing over a body of water, not recognizing that the bone in the water is the same bone in his mouth. And we are a situation where we are willing to throw out greater powers because we are looking for something that no one can say to us yet what that is. So you listen to and Councillor Benoit was correct. You hear them in the debate, and everybody is throwing out an idea of what they think the autonomy should look like for Tobago. So you hear federalism, and the minority leader was correct when he asked the question: if it's secession, you all won't say that. And so we holding on to this thing that is inferior, and that is what blows my mind. We holding on to a thing that we say it's inferior. We know it has worked for us, but we know that it is inferior. So we holding on to this thing that is inferior and not wanting to take something that is better for the governance of the island and for the progress of the island. Because why? Because we think that it is going to look good on the resume of the government in Trinidad. And to me, that style of governance is really, and I don't want to use it, but it comes across as very childish. Because when we talk about consultations, and Chris, you were very clear in the amount of consultations that were done in Tobago. And that was
Trinidad and Tobago.
No. Well, I was thinking,
the consultations went to Trinidad.
Right. So I was just saying about
outside of those consultations, the Joint Select Committee would have had further consultations.
Yeah. Correct. So when we talk about the Tobago consultations or the position of Tobago, that's one. And then you take that goes to the cabinet. The cabinet lays the bills as they are in the parliament, and then the parliament does an additional layer of consultations.
Yeah.
And you see, persons have to understand, but people may be asking, so why didn't Parliament just pass the bills as was sent from Tobago? But the reality is, you see, we also have to look at the national picture because we are still part of a unitary state. And I'm saying the short time that I have been in the Parliament, I have never seen a bill come or any significant piece of legislation come to the Parliament that there aren't amendments done to it.
No rubber stamps. No rubber
Exactly.
stamps.
Even when the Attorney General brings a piece of legislation, sometimes on the floor of the debate or at committee stage, the Attorney General brings amendment to the legislation he brought. And so I want persons to understand that no legislation is perfect.
Yeah.
And a legislation is a living, breathing thing. And you may pass a bill today, and 2 weeks from today, you recognize that there's a lacuna in the law and you have to come back and sort it out. And so I want to join with Kwesi as well, and I know all of us tonight have the same call. We said, listen, we need a united voice to say to the Parliament, especially those of the opposition, because we know we have the votes of the government. So those in the opposition, we need to say to them, listen, this is what we want. Give us the additional autonomy that we need, additional powers that will see Tobago move from where it is to I would say light years ahead of where it is now. Yeah. Let's pass the bills and let's work on making Tobago a better place for all of us and for our children to come. And then 20 years down the road, another administration may come and say, listen, we're ready for amendments to this amendment to that, update to that. And that's how the process takes place. Yeah.
And I just want to jump in where Senator came off, because this process in terms of looking at 1996 and recognizing the inefficiencies, those conversations started since 2004. And it would have culminated sometime in 2021.
Yeah.
So just imagine if these bills are to lapse and not pass. I think it would affect us for generations.
Yeah,
it therefore means that we have to restart a new process.
Yeah.
How long will that process come to a stage where we currently are? So to me, if there are recommendations coming on the side of the current THA administration, bring those recommendations to the fore. Let us have the conversations. Pass the current amendments. I'll pass the current bills that are before the Parliament, and nothing debars or prevents us from resuming another process. Because what is currently before us is way more superior. And in terms of improvement, it's the greatest improvement that we would have had in relation to Tobago's autonomy.
Yeah.
It is greater than what we had between 1980 to 1996.
Yeah.
The improvement is exponentially more than what we have. So I'm saying, let us come together, have a consensus, pass the bills, and let us continue to seek the greater autonomy that we require.
Thanks a lot, Minority Council and Senator Islap Kwesi. Quite valuable contributions. As per usual, we are never ever out of words or valuable content, but the time continues to seem to always catch up with us. However, we are looking forward to part 2 as we continue the autonomy conversation, believing that this is one of the most significant moments in Tobago's future. and our trajectory towards improvement. So we're going to be hosting a part 2 next week.
Yeah,
Tuesday.
and I just want to put this plug in very quickly. I'm sorry that I didn't share this information with the host, but on Sunday, at the Court Hall Multipurpose Facility, we have that conversation continuing from the level of the council, where we're going to hear from the MP for Tobago West, Tobago East, the minority councillor as well, and the political leader, Tobago Council, Senator Ansel Dennis, on this conversation about autonomy. So the conversation continues before Minority Report next week, Sunday coming at the multipurpose facility. There's a flyer, the multipurpose facility at 4 p.m. So we're asking everyone to come out.
Come out.
And be part of the conversation. The conversation continues.
And folks were saying that this is important to Tobago. It's a shame that we have not seen this administration pilot this. However, the People's National Movement continues to remain committed in office and out of office to not just educate the public, but to also take serious matters pertaining to the development of Tobago and by extension Trinidad and Tobago. I want to thank the panelists this evening for a very, very informative session. I know it took a lot from each of you to be present, to be a part of the conversation, and we look forward to continuing this in our part 2 next week. Folks, we thank you for staying logged on with us. Thanks for continuing to make the Minority Report the most watched current affairs program. My name is Marlon David, your host. Have a wonderful evening and stay blessed.